It's always better on holiday. So much better on holiday. And that's why we only work when we need the money. Thus spake the great philosopher Franz Ferdinand. And it was with that thought in mind that, I left this desk behind, I left this room behind, and I took a vacation. It was lovely. Just south of where I'm at now and significantly closer to the sand, to the sea, and, as I say, away from this microphone, away from many other things. I left lots of things behind me. But you know what I didn't leave behind, dear listener, dear watcher, is the bitter, bitter aftertaste left in my mouth by Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. Now, I know we're wandering into very dangerous territory. I know that the internet is saturated by white boys of my age, older, younger, around my age, my demo, complaining about how Marvel has lost its way. How the CGI is bad. That's the maybe the most surface and maybe most acceptable of the complaints. And then they usually veer off whatever their, veneer criticism was into more openly racist and sexist critiques of, a series of movies based on decades of comics made by an entertainment company that has, for those same number of decades, openly championed representation in media. So I'm not going to be doing that today because I'm not an entitled little racist brat. And I personally love She-Hulk. I personally love Miss Marvel. Phenomenal stuff. I'm very, very, very happy that we have moved away from just, white men with money punching things. That's the side of Marvel that's fun to watch, engaging, good action movies, right? But we want to get into the weirder stuff, the kookier stuff, the funnier stuff, the more offbeat stuff. And that's where we're getting to. I mean, Werewolf by Night was amazing. Plenty of white men in that, but lots of different ideas and fun, new, exciting things to do with all this wealth of characters. And you know me, I'm all about that Marvel. Hence all those titles I just rattled off. I've been reading comics since I could read. And I've been watching these movies since they started coming out, since before there was even a cinematic universe to tie them all together. I've been enjoying this stuff. But something is happening. Something is changing. And then it isn't really just limited to the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Cinematic, wow. It also seems to impact other movies made by the parent of Marvel and the parent of maybe all of the good entertainment stuff that I've grown up with and become nostalgic over and is having its own resurgence. Don't get me wrong, it's a good time to be a Marvel fan, a Star Wars fan, and potentially a fan of all of the stuff that, Disney bought when they bought Fox. A lot of characters there, a lot of properties there they can bring back from the dead. We're talking Fantastic Four, X-Men, Remember Hugh Jackman as Wolverine? We all love him. Well, guess what? He's got another life now under the House of Mouse. Very exciting, right? Because what you assume is that with a company that big, with resources that overflowing, and with just this wealth of IP from different mergers and acquisitions, as well as their own, plethora of original characters. You have to assume that in the same way that, a really talented and popular pop artist begins to attract the very, very best songwriting and production and, artwork and fashion design talent under one roof. And you can, stretch further and further and further with your ambitions, because now you're unassailable in terms of what you have available to you, and like I say, just the sheer resources that you have to use and to utilize and to employ and also at this point, obviously, you have all these fans who will, like me, just see whatever. So given that you have almost guaranteed bums in seats, one could argue that you have an opportunity to now take some creative risks. And that's what I thought was going to happen. And that's what seems to be happening on Disney Plus. They're making a little bit offbeat, a little bit weird shows about little less known characters, and going a bit further, right? But the movies, there's something going on with the Marvel movies. And indeed, there's something going on with the Star Wars movies. And actually, just to contradict what I've just said, there's something going on with the Star Wars shows as well. And I'm trying to get to the bottom of what it is. But let me describe the symptoms first. The first canary in the coal mine was the latest Thor movie. Okay? It's fun. A lot of fun. We got Taika Waititi, okay? The director of the moment. Everybody loves a bit of Taika. He's killing it on this show. He's killing it on that movie. And to be fair, he rescued the Thor franchise from itself. We got Thor 2 is very melodramatic. There's lots of sadness and heaviness and over-the-topness and grandiosity, and everybody's snarling when there's a villain, and everybody's, rippling and muscled when they're a good guy, and there's a whole damsel in distress narrative with Natalie Portman that was so poor, it forced her to leave the entire franchise. So Taika comes along for number 3 and absolutely smashes it. It's colourful, it's fun, there's genuine humour that actually lands, there's excitement, there's just so much going on that so many other Marvel movies, even at the time, and especially this particular franchise within the franchise, did not have. And he smashed it, and it was amazing. But then he did the 4th one, and it wasn't so amazing. There's a lot of very dynamic CGI scenes where beautiful, spectacular things are happening. And, it's just an absolute feast for the eyes. There's so much to see. And the work of the artist that went to create this visual scene, is absolutely top tier. And then the next scene, the next shot even, comes back to the actors. And they are stood perfectly still. And they stand perfectly still while they say their lines to one another. And their lines are not dramatic, quippy, but not funny. And they kind of stand still, and they kind of stand on a perfectly flat surface. You can see that there's, again, interesting visual things happening in the background, but they themselves, there's just no dynamism whatsoever, the actors. And then the next shot, we're back to the background, the CGI, and it zip, zap, zop. There's energy, there's just so much going on and so much to take in once more. And so we flit between these two states of absolute stock still lack of dynamism and over the top bright, full on, epilepsy inducing colors and shapes of the CGI. Back, forth, back, forth. And it feels like two separate movies that are somehow connected together, but you're not really sure how, because they seem to have been made at different times and just edited together. And then you kind of blast through the story, if it can be called such, and then 2 hours later it's kind of over, and you remember some of the beautiful scenes and you think, wow, that was quite cool how they did that really beautiful shot, but there was nobody in that shot. And then if you think of the dialogue and the actors and the scenes where they act, you think, what the fuck were they talking about? And what was any of what was said? And was there a plot line? And that's weird, right? Because, as discussed, isn't this the director of the moment? Doesn't he have unlimited resources? Isn't this the fourth movie in a franchise that has been wildly successful? Isn't there like almost no stakes for you to deliver something again? People are coming to see the movie, so you can go crazy and you can do a whole bunch of awesome stuff, and you have your actors and you have this very imagination expanding kind of scene that they're acting in. Why can't you let them loose? The other thing is, these actors, look at Hemsworth. For God's sake, he's built like a brick shithouse. Like, he's trained and he's rippling with musculature, but standing still. And then there was the Guardians of the Galaxy Christmas special. Now, I wasn't expecting a lot, because it's a one-off little Christmas special situation. But Guardians has become a big franchise now. Chris Pratt, he's a big deal now. And whatever, the others. Who cares? But again, we went from very intense CGI drama and action to very stilted actors standing very still and kind of saying lines that it sounded like they were embarrassed to say. And I can understand that. Some of these comic lines are going to be weird, going to be over the top, but it was the more normal human lines that were just delivered as if they were just awkward interchanges between people who didn't know each other. It felt like these actors were saying these things on their first day on set ever. And then, switching franchises, we had the Obi-Wan Kenobi show. Now this, the opportunity here for a home run, right? We've got Ewan McGregor, back from obscurity, back from riding a motorbike somewhere with his brother or whatever he did. We've got Hayden Christensen, much maligned for his acting in the Star Wars prequel trilogy, right? He's back from obscurity as well. Has he done anything since? What was that movie? Jumper with Summer from the OC? Who knows? You have the opportunity here. Again, unlimited resources. Just rock solid IP. You can do anything in this world. You show a bunch of lightsabers. You show a bunch of, bearded, robed men. It's going to be rocking, right? We went once again from beautifully shot, amazingly sculpted CGI action, sweeping, beautiful planets that the mind can't even comprehend, to extremely stilted, standing still actors awkwardly delivering crappy dialogue. And if you've already seen this, then you already know this. You already know what I'm about to talk about. There is not one, but two incredibly embarrassing chase scenes where Ewan McGregor, classically trained and compelling actor, is forced to chase a little girl playing a young Leia Skywalker. And he's forced to chase her at what seems to be walking pace, whilst she runs as fast as her little legs will carry her, but not that fast, right? You could catch up with her in about 5 paces. And yet we're sort of trying to make this scene happen as if, like, whatever we do, Obi-Wan just can't catch up with her, can't quite get her. And this happens in 2 episodes on the trot. And then we have the much-awaited battle between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader finally facing one another again, and they just kind of stand still. I think you've got the idea by now. So the question is, what the fuck is happening, right? The answer is the volume. Now, if you've come this far, thank you. And let me take you further down this rabbit hole of useless movie trivia and knowledge. The volume is a new kind of cinematography technique and approach that Disney, and I think specifically ILM, Industrial Light and Magic, is very proud of. They're very proud of inventing this, and they're very, very happy to use this over and over again. And the reason they like this is because the volume... Now, you may be used to the idea of actors in these, big showpiece fantasy sci-fi movies acting in front of massive green screens, right? And it's all very like, here's the actors, awesome costumes, brutal green screen behind them, and the stuff behind them will get added in post. Will get added afterwards, will get stitched together. Nice enough, right? The volume kind of just shifts that around.
Basically, it's a big circular room made of LED screens, and you project your environments on the screen. So imagine, 1,000 televisions all in a big circle in the ceiling as well, and then you put an entire environment 360 degrees. And what's great is it lights the characters, and the actors themselves can see all of the stuff. They can see what instead of on a green screen or a blue screen, you're asking the actors to pretend they're looking at something. And then you put that in later on. And so often they'll be looking at like a little dot on a green screen or a tennis ball on a stick. And then they ask, what is this? And you have to say, I don't know. It might be a dragon, but it also might be a flying dolphin.
And as far as I'm aware, this was invented around the time of and utilized best for the first Star Wars show on Disney+, The Mandalorian. Featuring man of the moment, Pedro Pascal, back when, he hit his face a bit more, I guess. And I would say used to amazing effect, because that is a beautiful and compelling show, at least in its first season. The shots that use the volume, you can't tell. It's done to great effect. It adds fantastic realism. It's a very immersive show that, because of the way it's shot, because of the way it's paced, really pulls you into the world of this very, mysterious kind of cowboy-esque kind of character. So at that stage, utilized to great effect, I would argue. But the problem with the volume is, if you don't use it right, it looks very, very bad. Because if you don't know how to use a small room in which your actors are standing, it kind of looks like, even though there's a fantastical environment around them, it kind of looks like they're in a small room. And that they are just kind of standing very still in the middle of that room, which has a very, very flat floor, and they are just plonked in there, and the CGI behind them is actually doing the heavy work. And this, I believe, is the problem that has impacted all of these movies. So we've got that Thor 4, a lot of standing still, a lot of volume. We've got Obi-Wan, awful chase scenes, all of them in the volume. Can't even remember the other movie I mentioned, but definitely got the volume going on in that as well. Guardians of the Galaxy. That was bad. That was really bad. That was easily the worst one. You could really tell that they were just in a small room. And so, that brings us to the point of this episode. Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. It is the worst of all of these offenders. We have some of the most mind-bending CGI in the biz. Again, I'm not here to bash the CGI artists. The stuff they can do, the images that they can put on screen, the character design, the world design is unbelievable, unimaginable, even from when we were watching the kookiest stuff, when we were kids. Even from the comics. It's just so out there, it's so cool, and it's so impressive to see what these artists can do. And those scenes are great. And so we have Paul Rudd, he puts the helmet on, and suddenly he's in the CGI scene. He's extremely fluid, everything around him extremely fluid, zip zap zopping through this quantum space that's all going on. This is happening over here. Now this is attacking me. Bright colors, explosions. It's just a feast for the eyes. And then he steps into the volume. The helmet comes off and he never moves again. And it's just 1, 2, 1, 2. And this one goes a little bit further, right? Whereas those other movies, those other films, they had something going for them in terms of plot, in terms of, characters returning that we were excited about, in terms of, there's emotion here, there's laughter there. This had nothing, absolutely nothing. And it had the job of introducing the big bad guy of the next few movies. We already know he's going to be in the next few movies. He's the man of the moment, Jonathan Majors. He's come in, he's playing Kang, who is, in the comics, one of my favorite characters. He's such a fascinating villain. He's got so much going for him. He's got so much history, and there's so much you can do with him on screen, and it's going to be super exciting, right? And in fairness, every time he steps on screen, it is spellbinding. He is a phenomenal actor, no matter what kind of script you give him. And we're wandering into spoiler territory now. So if you haven't seen Ant-Man 3, just maybe just skip ahead, and I guess I'll stop giving it all away soon enough. He is defeated so easily and in such an embarrassingly poorly written fashion. I was in the cinema. No one laughed at any of the jokes, but when Kang was defeated, the whole cinema erupted. It was so embarrassing. It's, this guy spends the entire movie talking about how terrifying he is, the empire that he's built up, the power that he has, the fear that he strikes into his enemies. He is defeated by being knocked over backwards by a giant ant. And that's it. And then later on, he gets sucked into a little thing, not even sure what he is. And the CGI in that moment is maybe, again, some of the most embarrassing shit I've ever seen in my life. And again, everybody else on screen is standing perfectly still while the bad guy gets sucked into a little device. The image of him getting sucked in is so it's done on paint, right? When you're on paint, you grab a little, and you kind of shift scale it. I guess maybe you can't do that on paint, maybe Photoshop. But if you just grab a corner of the thing and squanch it down to a smaller size, that happens in the highest budget, most tentpole fucking franchise within a franchise, third of the trilogy, big moment introducing Jonathan Majors, shift scale down. He just goes whoop. Like, if you'd added a slide whistle to show him being shrunk, it wouldn't have been out of place. It was so cringe and embarrassing. I just couldn't believe it. I know that the MCU is a series of action movies that is fun for all the family and fun for all ages, right? And I know that they're based on comics, which are inherently kind of silly and bombastic and playful. And one could argue, Tom, you're in your 30s now. Why are you watching this kind of content? To which I say, shut up, man. Leave me alone. I like what I like. Okay? And I like a dramatic, subtitled, independent movie just as much as the next art house loser. But I also like what I like, and I like watching these movies. And the thing is, even when they're okay, they're fun to watch. But this was bad. So I spent a lot of time there, like, really spearing the volume, right? I think that caused a lot of issues in terms of what felt like the pacing, the dynamism from the exciting CGI and the action and the punching and the shooting and the banging and the crashing to the complete stock stillness. It's once you see it, you hashtag can't unsee it. Okay, if you see that the actors are on a perfectly flat floor and you see that they can't move too much, they're in the volume. I'm sorry that I've ruined all action movies going forward for you, but that's the case. And then I went to see Avatar 2. Amazing movie, right? Script, absolute dog shit. I mean, I don't know what is going on in James Cameron's head, but like the first one, laughably bad in terms of the plot. The second one, an absolute joke. Doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So confusing, everybody's motivations and what's going on in their dynamics. But maybe one of the most beautiful cinematic experiences I've ever had. It is unbelievable that, I'm fully immersed in this absolutely fantastical world. Every single shot is exquisite. It's just spellbinding. So, it does enough work visually that you forget about how truly dreadful the script and the actors are. And then I watched a breakdown of the visual effects because, as evidenced by this episode, I like this shit. And what did I discover? They use the volume. And that really opened my mind. And I started to understand what was going on. It's not the volume's fault. It's not the tool that is the problem. You can record in a small room and it can look like you're standing still in a small room. Or you can record in a small room and it can look like you're on Pandora, a fantastical water-covered world where anything is possible. And I realized all of a sudden that this is about being a good filmmaker that is allowed the time to use the tool to its best advantage, right? I recognized something in this that I remember hearing from Peter Jackson. Smashed it out the park, right? With Lord of the Rings. Amazing trilogy of movies, world-renowned, still stand up 20 whatever years later, right? Incredible trilogy, faithfully adapted, a real best-in-class example of how to do an adaptation from a book to the screen. And, the visual effects, fantastic for their time. They still stand up, but even now it's just like astonishing to see, and especially then, amazing. Then he was forced to do The Hobbit, almost at gunpoint by the sounds of it. And it just sounds like things really went to shit. And the studio was forced to do things completely out of order. And the planning that Jackson had done for the trilogy, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the way that he'd been able to really ingest the material, understand it, plan what he was going to do on the screen and achieve it and get it done and make something that as I say, stood the test of time and remains impressive throughout the decades. He was not allowed to do this. And there are several clips of him absolutely losing his way. And, production being cancelled and things being changed last minute and things being changed during, and the depression that he seems to fall into because he's not allowed to do Tolkien's work justice in the way that he wanted to. But he is an accomplished filmmaker who already has experience doing this. So what was the difference? He was forced by the executives, by the top downs, to make a movie in such a way that he ended up with tools that would be good, but he was not able to use them correctly. Actors that would be good, but he couldn't get them to work because even though he had the talent, had the resources, had the ability, had the knowledge, had the experience, he was in conditions and working conditions that didn't allow him to do what he was able or trying to do in a different context.
I was able to wing it right up until the point that I had to start shooting this very intricate battle. I couldn't wing that really. I did need to know what the hell I was doing and have a plan.
So what happened? And I started thinking about this, and I started thinking about comparing it to my own career, my own professional experience. And I think about the situations that I've been in when I've worked with, I've always been as big as I've been, which is not very, but I've had the great pleasure of working for amazing brand names, like huge brand names, huge companies that have crazy resources. They have a message. They've signed on household names in terms of the talent that's going to be involved. They have the vision. They have the tools available to them and the people who knows how to use the tools. And yet, try as we might, working for those big names, and hired as we've been to be experts and do fantastic, creative, inventive, risk-taking work, what we put out was dog shit. Just really uninspiring, by the numbers, and often embarrassingly poor work. And I felt that frustration a million times because I've been in a room full of talented people that I would love to say that I'm one of. And we've all tried our hardest to make this thing amazing, but it doesn't turn out amazing. And there is one fucking reason. And that is executive overreach, executive handling and mishandling, endless meetings, taking the core idea, which was phenomenal and exciting and brought in all this talent and attracted us as an agency and got us all excited at the beginning, and it is killed by 1,000 cuts, by endless meetings, by people talking over each other, by people arguing that we shouldn't take risks. We should take risks. Oh, but what if we just took this risk? Are people going to get this idea? What if they... And the thing that at the beginning of the creative process was beautiful and exciting and was going to just like change the goddamn world with how amazing it was, is slowly drawn out on the rack until it's stretched into a thin paste of nothingness. It is the most defeating feeling in the world. knowing that you had all this opportunity, that you had the people to fulfill on the opportunity, the potential and the opportunity to realize that potential is right there in front of you. And how it dies is the people who are funding the thing, who, and I'm not being insulting when I say this, they're not the creatives. And the reason I know they're not the creatives is because they've hired us to be the creatives. That is a tacit, admitting that we don't know what we're doing in terms of creating this thing. We trust you, the experts in creativity, to do the thing. So even as that is the conversation that begins the process, at some point, these people involve themselves and say, I know I said at the beginning that I want to take a risk, but I'm worried that we're taking like a risk. And that is how creativity dies. And so I was sat watching what was supposed to be the zaniest, kookiest, most creative, most exciting Marvel movie so far. 15 years they've been making just this particular sect of the franchise, right? You think they could just... Here's what's up. You think they could churn them out at this point? And when I say churn, you imagine that being, if not bad, then average? You think they could hit average at this point? This movie was not average. It was extremely poor. Not in the CGI. Not even... People had an issue with MODOK. Dude, the character is a crazy giant head that floats around and murders people. You can't get that. That's nothing but funny. That's nothing but kooky, okay? That's not the issue with the movie. The issue with the movie is that someone has seen the MODOK character and gone like, are we taking too much of a risk? Can you just make that a bit more like this? Can you just make that a bit more like that? Can we shoot this in the volume? Because we love the volume. Oh, you don't know how to use the volume? Well, you got to, because we've got it. We've booked out this time in the volume. Oh, we've only got Paul Rudd for so long? Okay, well, he only gets one take of his lines and then we're just going to move on. The thing is that this movie has to not only, wrap up the last 15 years, but also introduce the next 15 years. So we're going to have to do all this, story in this very short space of time. But also it needs to be a family drama. But also, and there's just too much being asked. And you have these executives wanting to take risk, but also killing risk as it happens. You have this abuse of tools rather than use of tools, and you end up with an absolute disappointment of a movie which has turned me a card-carrying die-hard MCU boy into a straight hater. I'm so upset, and I recognize how funny that is, that I'm upset. And I recognize how on brand it is for a white boy of this age to be upset about his Marvel movies being bad. But I'm really trying to stress that I'm not the same entitled little bitch that these other guys are being. My rage is not at MCU got bad. MCU got woke. MODOK sucks, okay? My rage is at the executives that evidently killed this movie. It's so obvious that this excellent film, which had a lot of potential, died in meetings. And died because it was forced to be everything and nothing. Because the people who fund the project are not the people who know how to make a creative, exciting, kooky-ass comic book movie. And that's what I think the problem is.